Happy Friday, beautiful people, and hello to you all out there tuning in for your first sip of the weekend. You're tuned into your happy hour with Friday Feels. We're celebrating all you working professionals out there doing your crazy craft, embracing the beauty of being human and connecting authentically. We're your host, Sergeant Nicole. We're living and working around the world. We're holding space for you and we're keeping it raw and real as we share fresh content with you every week. Follow us on LinkedIn at Friday Feels and Instagram at These Friday Feels for updates throughout the week.
In our last episode, we chatted with Simon Hurry on the topic of petrol in the tank. We delved into money as a tool to put to use in the pursuit of your passions and how to get the balancing act, as well as the art of making and spending money right so that you can play to your strengths in what you create in this life.
And this week, we are joined by Léon Kowalski, a founder, a friend, an entrepreneur who has an adventurous and free spirit. He has walked a very interesting road from starting a business in software engineering and technology at the age of 19 to then later exploring the world of arts and acting, transitioned into serving the international market of product management in Australia and South Africa, and now runs the Cape Crypto Exchange, a cryptocurrency exchange venture based in Cape Town, with the vision of empowering financial freedom, not just for South Africans, but the world at large. So mostly to the potential of decentralization, we'll explore a little bit more of what that means. But firstly, a very big welcome to you, Léon. Wonderful to have you join us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, and great to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about what this topic means to you. We spoke about the topic for this week being currency of life. It's our last episode of Money Positivity for this month. And you mentioned that specifically you wanted to chat about the energy of freedom and the philosophical power of money. So what does that mean?
Well, straight off the bat.
That's a small question to start off with.
Okay. So, the currency of life and freedom and money and freedom, all of these things are very deeply intertwined. And I suppose for me, they're all extensions of philosophy and asking the deep questions of why are we here and what are we doing here and how do we spend our time? What are we going to do tomorrow? All of these sorts of big questions. What happens when we go? It's all intertwined with these, I think. And particularly, I guess for me, from a personal point of view, when we all come of age, we kind of have to make a decision, whether it's conscious or not, that we're going to keep living. You know, when we're children, we just do our thing. Our parents look after us. But once we're out of the nest, we all have to make some sort of decision to say, okay, let's commit to this thing called life. Let's commit to it. Let's go for it. Whatever it means to us, we're going to keep living. We're not going to pull the eject cord. And I think if we do that, after we do that, we have to then determine, what is this thing? How do we live this? How are we going to spend our lives? From that arises these questions around philosophy and purpose. And we start asking, okay, well, what is my purpose? Is there such a thing as a purpose? How can I find purpose in life? And that takes us down good rabbit holes. And it took me down a lot of deep journeys, a lot of interesting spaces. A career I had before software and technology was in the arts, in the film industry specifically, and theater. I think largely because that industry as a whole deals with these concepts head on. It deals with philosophy, it deals with purpose, and all these very interesting nuances of what humanity is and what it means to be a human. And I started there, and it provided a lot of nourishment and a lot of insight and a lot of depth and some sort of a purpose, but it never really scratched the itch entirely, just enough for a few years. And I think how I evolved from there, and just my journey evolved, was looking for more purpose. And the more I grew, and the more I grew up into an adult and understood more about how the world works and how the systems work around the world, specifically money, and how I sort of stumbled into that was that dealing with politics and economics, these are all actually extensions of philosophy. And I never understood that when I was younger. I always thought philosophy was its own branch, its own all-encompassing view of life and existence. But what I grew to learn and grew to understand was that economics and politics, they are actually direct manifestations of philosophy of life. Politics distills how we as people organize ourselves based on our philosophies as to what life is. These are very broad topics, and let's create a bit of a boundary, and we say, cool, this is our political leaning, this is how we're going to play together, and we move from there. And then likewise with economics, study of money, that's also an extension of philosophy, very much linked to it. And I think largely how I've come to this journey now was from the philosophy of economics, the philosophy of money, and what that actually means. It's actually a very deep subject when you dig into it, as you probably have obviously recognized over the last few weeks with all your guests. And when we actually open this thing up, when we crack below the surface and we start peeling these onion layers away, we start to see this beautiful, beautiful construct that we've come up with as humans called money. And this is why it's really the currency of life, and how this topic sort of resonates, because there is no life. If we consider philosophy to be life and life to be philosophy, money is the natural extension of that. It's a natural extension of life. And if we want to live our game of life, if we decide to keep playing this game and not pull the ejection cord, we have to deal with it. We have to deal with these manifestations, which is money, which is life, which is energy. It was that got me to this point, and here I am. Here I am sort of working with and getting to deeper and deeper layers as to what money is and what energy is and how that all intertwines and why we need energy and why we need money. I can dig into that a bit more if you want.
Well, I think it's interesting, right? You run a crypto exchange in Cape Town. And so for you, when you think of money as like the actual currency versus Bitcoin, what got you into that world? I think it's a really interesting time for people exploring. I know decentralization is a big thing for you. When did you first hear of Bitcoin? What drew you into this world? And how did you end up building a company around this? Because I think it's very important to your point of view on money positivity. So I'm very curious.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I started to move away from the arts and the filmmaking side particularly, part of the impetus to move away, part of the motivation there was I became very jaded with that whole world. I cracked through it. When I first moved into it, I always imagined it was very much a space of light and a space of love and a space of increasing consciousness in the world. And we share stories, and humans can resonate with these stories, and we watch movies and we watch plays and et cetera. And it uplifts us because we get to connect with other humans and that human experience. And unfortunately, what I started to see was that there was some of that, but when I first got into it, when I was first attached to it, there was a lot of that. And as I started to try and make money in that industry and progress in it a bit, I started to witness something I didn't like, which was a bit more propaganda and not so much genuine human sharing. It was a bit more, we want the people to think this way. We want people to feel this way. And it wasn't positive for me. These weren't positive things. And that started to push me away. And so I started to look around and see, okay, what's the agenda here? What are the intentions? Why is this not positive? And I went down the journey where, how can this be? How can this be? We've got individual artists, individual filmmakers doing stuff, yet somehow there's a bit of a coordinated effort to spread a certain message, a common message. Propaganda, in other words. And I really discovered this concept of centralization versus decentralization. And centralization means a central controlled thought. At its purest sense, I would possibly define that. It is centrally controlled, centrally defined, and then pushed out into the world. As opposed to decentralized, which is not starting from a central place, of authority, but starting from our own authority, where I have an idea, you, Saj, you, Nicole, you have ideas. We all have ideas of what life is. We've all decided to live this game. We've all had some sort of a philosophy and understanding. And what does that mean for us? It's our own unique experience. And the second we have somebody else telling us about what experience we should have and what conclusion we should draw from that experience, instead of fostering our own natural intuition, our own natural understanding of what this experience is, then we start running into this trouble space, which I didn't like. I started to feel very uncomfortable with, because sure, every movie has a message and every story has a moral, perhaps, but it's up to us to sort of derive meaning from that. And if we don't allow ourselves and we don't allow others to derive their own sense of meaning, we run into this awful space where individuality and self-expression and self-freedom get swept under the rug. And for me, human purpose is really comes down to all of us. What is our own individual purpose? What's our own individual freedom? We need the freedom to explore that. We need the freedom to figure ourselves out, to learn what our soul means. What's intuition? What are we doing here? All of these common questions which we never fully answer, I don't think. It's our whole journey to move from deeper and deeper understandings of ourselves. We need the space to do that. We need to live in a world where that is not only encouraged or not only allowed, but encouraged, I think, or at the very least allowed and respected. And yeah, so in the film industry, I saw that dark side where it's like, no, they're not actually wanting that. They're wanting the opposite. They want to control thought, control growth. And so that pushed me very harshly away from it. And then it was like, okay, if I'm not going to make money and survive through making films, I've got to do something else. And now, up until that point, I'd actually studied software engineering, because growing up, I was always fascinated with computers and tearing them apart and building them and all this. So I was very much a computer nerd and a jock at the same time. And I very much studied software engineering and had this as a backup. So I fell into that and started traveling, as the bio says, and started moving further around the world and trying to make my living in software and in technology ultimately. And through that journey of discovering how other people live and other means of work besides individual expression, which is what filmmaking is, I started to understand money and what money is. And when you sit down and you say, okay, let me make some of this thing called money, because I need to buy food, I need to put a roof over my head and put some lights on. What the hell is money? We've been told it's this piece of note with pictures of people on it, and it's got a number in the corner, and we can give it to someone, and then somebody gives us something in return. We so naturally believe that this is natural because we've seen it our whole lives. But when you really start to crack it open, it revealed all this beautiful philosophy, like I just mentioned earlier. And so I think at that point, my eyes were a little bit more opened, and I started to develop a relationship with money. Before that, I had the same relationship that everyone else has, which is, you got these millionaires and billionaires, and then there's some poor people, and I'm somewhere in the middle. For those of us that weren't born into royalty, and I think that's been the common middle class experience for the majority of us. And when I started to crack open that, I started to see that, wow, actually, that's not the truth. That's such a simplistic idea of what money is. It's a negative view, in fact, and it's a very much, it's holding the reins back on ourselves, because it's not allowing us to really have a loving relationship with this thing called money. And this thing called money, why I say loving relationship, is because it directly translates to what life is. And the more money we have, the more time we have, the more freedom we have to explore ourselves. The more we get to explore ourselves, the more we get to love our experience. And the only way to get to that position is to have the time. And the only way to get time is to earn money or get money. And it became highly correlated for me. And then I started to see, wow, okay, so where is money now? Where is it concentrated? Okay, wow, there are things called governments. There are central banks. There are all these entities in the world which control all this money flow now. And it's like, well, how do I get money? Okay, I've got to go to a bank and get a loan. Okay, how does that all work? okay, this, okay, that. And I started to explore this whole concept as to how do I get money? How do I get time to enjoy life? How do I get time to have freedom to explore what purpose is? And how do I get time to live that purpose? And most of us then say, okay, well, we've got to get a 9 to 5. That's what we stumble into. Okay, get a job. All right, cool. Let me learn some skills and I will go work somewhere and someone's going to give me some money in exchange for these skills. And it's a skill exchange. And how do we determine how much money I can get for my skills? It's a value game. And this becomes a negotiation where a company owner, a business owner will say, all right, I value this skill. This is what I'm prepared to pay you for it. Do you accept these terms? Yes, I do. Great. Here is the value, which we call money, and you give me your time in the shape of these skills. And this is our sort of standard system of how we work with each other and how we exchange value and skills for each other's time. So I can go and work 5 days a week and I get paid some money. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I've got some money to spend and I can go and enjoy my time on the weekend. This is very much how things have been for a long time. And so you do that for a while and you spend some time working and you realize very quickly that there's no exit. You realize very quickly, I'm making some money, but it's just enough to keep the lights on. It's just enough to keep my Netflix subscription, just enough for a bit of food. But it's not enough for me to stop working. How do I stop working so I can get more freedom, so I can get more time for myself? I need to get time so I can do purpose, so I can live in my philosophy and explore what it means to be human. And then you start to dig deeper. And all of a sudden I started to see, okay, wow. All right, in order to make real money, I have to be the person who is in control of value. I have to be the one who decides what is valuable in my life, because then I can get people to give me skills and I can get people to pay me for that value. In other words, I can become a business owner, because then the more value I provide, I can provide more value to more people. They can pay me for that value. I make more money. It becomes a trade of value. And working in a 9 to 5 or a direct job with somebody, you don't have much leverage. You've just got one-to-one. You only have your 40 hours a week, 50 hours, 60 hours, whatever. It's still a very small amount of time. And you only have one salary. There's only one person paying you. But if you start running your own business, you now have 1 million employers, right? Every customer is an employer. Every single customer, when you run a business, they're your employer. They pay you. So it's the same paradigm. It's just inverted. So I'm now selling a product instead of my direct labor, which was my skills. I'm now selling a product. And I can say, here's my product. And I can sell it to 1 million people at once. And I get paid by 1 million employers. It's fantastic. And it's an uplifting experience, because you're adding value to people and you're saying, I've supplied more value to more people today and they've paid me. Therefore, my net worth is raised. I've been paid more because I've provided more value into the world. And now I've got time. Now I can go and continue to explore my purpose.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you for taking us on that journey.
Yeah.
And then since 2012, you've been involved in Bitcoin. So how did you hear about it? And what are your thoughts on it now, like within the next 10 years? Do you feel like it's going to constantly keep going up? Or do you recommend people buy? I mean, obviously it's not financial or legal advice, but what are your thoughts? I'm very curious on that side of it. Thank you for taking us to the business owner, but specifically the business that you're in and the products that you touch. What are your thoughts around that as it relates to money positivity?
Specifically with Bitcoin, and let me loop in the decentralization idea here. Thanks. I went off on a journey there. Part of the issue of getting this freedom is tax. And we pay taxes and we pay other things and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all the money that we make, we don't actually get to keep. They get paid to centralized bodies who determine what they will do with this money. And they believe they can spend our money better than we can. They believe that they make better decisions than we do. They believe that if you work for 40 hours a week, if your tax rate is 40%, or let's call it 50%, if your tax rate is 50%, then half the time you're working for another person to decide what to do with your money. It sucks. We're essentially slaves to others for half of our lives, half of our working lives. And that's the centralized model. There is an alternative, and it's called decentralization, where we fully decide where we're going to spend our money. We decide, I decide 100% of that 40 hours that I've worked. I decide 100% of where I'm going to deploy my capital that I've earned. If it means I want to go sit on a boat and drink vodka every day for the rest of my life, or for as much time as I can, so be it. If it means I want to open up a charity and go give food to the poor, I can do that too. If I want to create businesses, I can do that. And it becomes very much in line with the philosophy of self-discovery. You get to spend your energy there. And so once I realized that, I came across Bitcoin very quickly. Bitcoin was introduced to me through a friend of mine, and he came across it in 2012 because he used it to purchase goods on the internet. And it was very much obvious to him that this was a form of currency. You know, you could buy this thing called Bitcoin, you could buy stuff on the internet, and all of a sudden you had stuff from some sort of digital currency. And this is very familiar now, but back in 2012, it's the same thing as having email back in 95 when people were used to sending mail to each other through the post. And all of a sudden it's like, no, you can do it on this computer. We don't need a postman anymore. It's like, what are you talking about? You're a lunatic. There's no such thing. How's it going to get there? No, it goes through the wires. But what? I don't understand. What do you mean? How does the paper go through wires? And very much we got used to that as a civilization, and we understood it, and we embraced technology. And in the early days back in 2012, it was a similar concept. Like, what are you talking about? How do you send money? You know, where's the credit card? I don't understand. Or how do I send a check? And that's how it very much was then. So it's very much new. But the few of us who understood decentralization and understood that centralization saps our ability to explore life and have an enlightened life, ultimately, we very quickly recognized that Bitcoin actually is this incredible, beautiful tool that will reinforce decentralization, reinforce our self-expression, and reinforce humanity. And how does it do that? To your question, well, we get to be our own banks. Bitcoin specifically here, I don't mean other cryptocurrencies. There are other things called cryptocurrencies. And Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency because it uses this technology called cryptography as part of its technology. But forgetting all the technical stuff for a second, if we just think about what it is, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer network where we can exchange value directly with each other. I can hire somebody to come and design an advert for Cape Crypto, and I can pay them in Bitcoin. They can send me the advert and I can use it. Amazing. I didn't have to touch a bank. I didn't have to touch a bank account. I didn't have to tell anybody about it. Nobody knows. I've just had a nice little direct transaction with somebody. Same way you could go down to the shop. You could buy some fruits for dinner and you can pay the shopkeeper in Bitcoin. They can give you apples. You can go to the farmer and do the same thing. It is just a medium of exchange. And why this is so groundbreaking is because it is 100% peer-to-peer. We do not need a central authority. We do not need a middleman. We do not need somebody licking off their little fee on the way. We don't need some banker taking 2%. We don't need Visa and MasterCard taking 3.5%. We don't need our banks creating fractional reserve lending. And there's a whole section there, which I would love to get into. But at its core, it is a means for us to trade to each other, and we can be our own bank because money is secure. Before we had Bitcoin, we had gold. Well, we had fiat, but before fiat, we had gold. And gold, a lot of people will say Bitcoin is like digital gold. And they are right in some ways and wrong in others. And they are right in the sense that it's very close to sound money as possible. And by sound money, I mean that there is a limited supply to it. In gold, there was almost a limited supply. It's very much limited by how much can be mined. It's very expensive to mine this stuff, and we consider it a very small increase of gold every year. So if you hold gold, you pretty much hold your value. That value of gold will hold its value. It doesn't lose value over time. As opposed to fiat currency, local currencies like US dollars, rands, pounds, all our government-issued currencies, government-backed currencies, these all lose value over time. They lose value year to year. If you have 100 Rand or $100 this year, next year, you're going to have $95, roughly speaking, right? Roughly speaking, 95. It's probably worse than that, but just call it 95. And what that means is that if you could buy a grocery bag for $100, and that's got your rice, it's got your fish, your vegetables, your fruits. If you can buy that costs you $100 this year. Next year, you can't buy that. You have to chop something out of your bag. You have to lose a few apples. You haven't done anything. You've got $100 in the bank, but all of a sudden you can't spend the full. You can't get the same spending power. And this is what we call inflation. And inflation means that you lose that percentage every year from your energy, from your time. And I think it's always good to think about it in those concepts of energy, philosophy, time, freedom, because that's what's really happening. When people say inflation rate is 5%, it means year on year, if you do not do something, you will lose 5% of your energy. 5% of the energy that you've spent of attempting to swap value, to get value so that we can discover ourselves, that's been stolen from us through inflation. It's stolen. It's a hidden tax, not to mention tax itself. And so with Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin is so incredible is it acts as a hedge against that inflationary concept. It's a hedge against inflation. If you own Bitcoin, the government cannot inflate that. They cannot print more dollars. They cannot inflate the economy. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million. That's it. And so you need to get your hands on some of that. And the simple point is that the more we add dollars, the more the price keeps going up. The price of Bitcoin is really just the mirror reflection of the printing of dollars. It's the mirror reflection of inflation. As we print dollars, as we add inflation and inflate our economy of dollars, we see the Bitcoin price going up because there's a fixed amount of Bitcoin. The more dollars you have, the more equivalent price there is because it costs more dollars to get the same amount of Bitcoin because there's more in circulation now. There's more that can be spent. And this is a phenomenon of economics. This is how supply and demand works. And so the more the governments print, the more the price of Bitcoin's going up. So when you ask, is this a sound investment? Sure, I'm not a financial advisor, but from a personal capacity, I am 100% in Bitcoin. I'm all in that. And to me, it is so pure. And I wish we could get a bit more technical. Maybe we have another chat someday. The simplest version is the more dollars get inflated, the higher the price of Bitcoin. If you do not put your dollars, your hard-earned dollars that are sitting in your savings account, if you do not put that into Bitcoin, you will lose money year on year. You will lose 5% year on year. You will lose money. If you put it into Bitcoin, you will not only hold your money, hold your value, it will increase over time. In the long run, it might go through cycles up and down, as we've seen. It goes up and down, up and down. But the further adoption we get, the more people that move into Bitcoin and the more assets that get translated into Bitcoin, the more people sell real estate for Bitcoin, gold goes into Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera. The more stable that becomes, Bitcoin becomes stable, less volatility. It starts to become very much a strong safe haven asset. And you will not see as much downturn, as we've seen over time. So yes, I highly encourage everyone to do their research and to get some skin in the game. If you be risk averse, it's good. Put your 10% of your portfolio into it. Don't put the whole thing in until you understand what you're doing. Definitely. Do not trade altcoins. Don't gamble. That's gambling. Don't go buy other weird, Trump token and Nazi coin, all these strange coins that are coming up. They're junk. That's gambling. That's ridiculous. Bitcoin is what we want to talk about.
Well, it sounds like this is the right topic for you to come on.
Yeah, it's just curious to me, as we've moved through this theme of money positivity over the last couple of weeks, we've gone from, our own discussions around investment and savings and energy exchanges. We've had a chat with Alex about, what does freedom to him look like, which is taking his hard-earned money and creating creative projects in the world. We've heard from Rookie, who loves making money. So for her, it's all about how do I use money to make more money? And And then Simon talking last week about money just being a tool for change for him, like petrol in the tank. So I'm curious, Leon, like, what does that freedom look like for you? Like, when you're making money, when you're using money, do you believe in, I mean, you obviously believe in investment in Bitcoin, but yeah, what is that? What are you deploying your money into? And what does that like passion look like for you?
I think for me, I don't think it's an actual a specific use of it, an application of it, like building a project or doing a film or something like that. Those are all wonderful ideas, which I'd love to explore one day. But for me, the freedom is particularly with Bitcoin, and why, yes, it's an investment, but it's more than that. It's a stand for freedom. It's a stand against tyranny. And these might sound like dramatic concepts, but it really is a stand against globalization. And globalization is really just a masked word for centralization on maximum level. It's turning the dial to full is globalization. We are centralizing everything to a central body, and they will make all the decisions. That to me is it's terrifying, and it's something we as humanity should very, very, very much strongly guard against. And so when I put money into Bitcoin, that's what I'm doing. All of us that hold Bitcoin and don't spend it and don't sell it yet, a lot of people will call these people Bitcoin maxis, which means they are very much maximalist on the philosophy of Bitcoin. And I am to a degree, but I'm also more so a freedom maxi, I would describe. And this is a word that sometimes gets thrown around. Bitcoin is excellent, but for me, it's the tool that yields the greatest freedom. So freedom for me is that. It is almost peace of mind. It is freedom for others. I want others to have freedom. I want the world to have freedom, because the more we all have our freedoms, it's rational self-interest. We all get to see the beauty of each other from a real core level. I don't mean the surface stuff, I don't mean Marxist category stuff. I don't mean ideology. I mean who we really are as people. Let's share that with each other. And that's beautiful. And that's when we have unique experiences of life, where we can have a conversation and you say something I've never thought of or I've never heard, and I feel a new way. When we hear the same old rehashed philosophies, like I've felt everything I can, there's no growth there. But when I have a conversation with someone who's so deeply in touch with their souls, or they create a project, or they create artwork, or they do a business, or anything, their expression, what they put into the world, it's a magical human experience. And I want that. I want those magical experiences. And those can only come when people operate on the level of the soul, when they operate in a true freedom state, when they're in touch with their divinity. And to attain that, we need to defend against globalization, because globalization puts people into categories and forces you to think and be a certain way. And they present ideas in a certain way, and certain ideas are not allowed, and there's a lot of censorship. And these things cull the human spirit. And so Bitcoin for me is a means of guarding against that. It's a means of saying, all of us together, let's stand together. Once we have enough critical mass in Bitcoin, and once enough capital flows into this space, and there's enough people who do this thing, it flips. We're still up the hill. We're climbing the hill at this point. We're climbing. More people are jumping on. They're jumping on the wagon. We're all going up the hill. There's a point where we get to the top, and we come down, and then it's unstoppable. And at that point is when we're all transacting with each other directly on Bitcoin, most likely Bitcoin at this point. And it's freedom. We don't have central authorities describing what we can do. There's a very evil concept coming in now called central bank digital currencies. And this is, it's evil, and I use that word in the strongest sense. It is evil. It is evil because it is a means of other people to control our time and energy, which in other words means control our lives, makes us slaves. And a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, is a digital currency which is issued and controlled by a bank, simply put, and by extension, a government, because the government writes rules for central banks. And these central bank digital currencies are programmable in the sense that they have software behind it. So if you get paid by a central bank digital currency, call it a digital dollar, you get paid 1,000 digital dollars. This $1,000 has got software behind it. And this software describes where you can spend it, where you can't spend it, how long you can spend it for. If you do something naughty, they can take it back from you. They can revoke it. So if you was busy sitting on a talk with a guy and two girls, and I'm discussing how the tyranny of global, how bad the tyranny of globalization is, they might not like what I have to say. They might come along and say, okay, we don't like this guy, Leon. He's a bit of a rabble rouser. He's a bit of rebellious. Let's take some money from him. They can do this. And this is not what's the term? It's not conspiracy theory at all. This is simply agenda, and it's all put out there. We had a look at the French CBDC the other day, what they've been developing, and the French CBDC has the code in it, which is the word for it, I think, is something like reclaim, something to that effect. And so anyone who controls that central bank digital currency, they can then put in the address of wherever that token currently sits. It could be sitting with Usage or Unicol or someone you've spent and bought fruit from, some just good old merchant on the street corner who you've gone and spent your digital currency towards, and they're using it to pay their bills. If they don't like someone on the chain, like me, for example, they could then go to that to the merchant and say, we're taking that money. And they take it without asking him, without permission. They just reclaim it. They freeze it. And these are terrifying concepts. Terrifying. We cannot let them happen. We cannot let these things happen. And one of the stances against that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin allows us to trade directly. No one can stop it. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's very powerful. And this enforces decentralization. Keeps us at community levels, community. So yeah, sorry, long-winded answer there. You get me going, I'll talk rings around this stuff for days.
Super interesting.
Yeah, I'll be Googling a lot of this.
Yeah.
But like the layman's terms, you should give a little TED talk on this. I don't know if Ted will let you say it, but you put it on YouTube. No, but it's very interesting. And it sounds like you've also spent a lot of time internally kind of figuring out what currency means to you, right? And in different capacities. And so we do have a lot of young listeners, and we like to ask people on your happy hour is, what advice do you have for those who are trying to navigate their path?
I think first is to identify your true passion, not what you think your passion is, not what you think other people want your passion to be, what your real passion is. And that's a difficult journey because you really have to understand yourself. And that comes with it, that whole thing. So you have to be prepared to go down that path and really go for it. And it's difficult for some. So yeah, definitely stick with your passion, but then make money through your passion. So if you correlate and you highly correlate and understand deeply the concept that freedom and living your passion, which is your purpose, if you understand these are all correlated, in order to keep that thing flowing, you need money. So you must highly tie money to your passion. These things should be highly correlated, and it should be exciting, and it should fill you with endless energy. If you have endless energy where you can work 120 hours a week consistently, and you have to force yourself to stop whilst you're living your passion, whilst you're trying to make money through your passion, then I think you're on the right track. If you have to if you have to force yourself to sit down and do this thing which you think is your passion, or you have to force yourself, if you have to do this and you're like, I just don't want to think about money. If that's it, I would provide the advice that is not your true passion. Or if it is, you have not yet understood money and understood how it relates to your existence on earth and what money is. So I'd say dig around those. Learn money is life. Find your true passion. Merge them. And then go. Yeah. Go full steam. Just go. 120 hours a week. Go. Stop playing guitar. Stop drinking wine. Stop going away. Stop surfing. I'm saying that tongue in cheek in a way. Go work 100,000% until you're burnt out, and then you have to go drink wine and you have to go swim on the beach and play guitar. Once you get to that point, then you know you're in your passion. Then you're living. And then what happens is you don't need these external things because that stuff is fulfilling. building your passion and your money together is fulfilling. You don't need anything else. And occasionally you do, but yeah, that becomes your priority. You can't wait Monday. It's like, hello Friday feels awesome. It's also like hello Monday feels. Like, let me get that Monday in. Like, yes, it's Monday morning. Can't wait. Is it 4 a.m.? Can I get up yet? That's the energy. If you can get to that genuine energy, then that's your path to success.
I love that. And I think also part of Friday feels, I remember when we started this venture, Saj, remember we were saying like we want to extend Friday feels throughout the whole week. That's what everyone should be feeling, is that feeling every single day in what you're doing. So, I mean, that is the beauty of being a working professional and living and celebrating your truth, right? So I guess like 10 years ago, you didn't really see yourself here in this moment, Leon. But we've kind of walked a little bit of a journey already with you on that. So a year from now, where do you see yourself?
I'd certainly like to be deeper down the decentralization path. I'd like to have a few products that are 100% decentralized in the market. I'd like to solve, or at least be involved in tackling some of the more challenging aspects of decentralization, which is identity. How do we prove each other's identity to each other without leveraging a centralized provider? This is almost a gateway to a lot of friction and blockers that have prevented existing enterprises from moving to decentralization. Is it always kind of relies on a centralized identity? Show me your passport, show me your ID. You need to prove who I am, who you are, before we will sell you something or give you a loan or this or that or the other. And that's been a huge blocker. And there's a lot of smart people working on decentralized identities. And in a very quick nutshell, it's fascinating because it works on blockchain technology. And there's some interesting projects which actually work on the Bitcoin network. And it's interesting. It's very hard to wrap your head around when you're first exposed to it, but you can present your own digital identity. You control it. And if Nicole is a customer of Saj and Saj runs a product and says, I need to know Nicole is actually Nicole, Nicole can present her digital identity. And that digital identity has got cryptographic proofs that certain claims of that identity are true. So if Nicole has a claim in there that says South African citizen, that has been written by a South African passport verifier, for example. So you could go to someone who verifies South African passports. They attest to it. They say, yes, Nicole does have a South African passport. Let's write that to her digital identity. Now she has that claim. And when you go to Saj can just see, okay, you have this claim. Yes, it is verified by a source, but she does not need to see the details of that document. She does not need to see South African ID number or any of that. She needs to know is that this has been verified. The claim is true. There's a whole deep world to that. Fascinating stuff. And we're making great inroads there. And so once that comes up, there's going to be a huge influx of decentralization. So a year from now, decentralized products, maybe in the identity space, but certainly still in the financial space. I think I love finance. I love money and how it all relates to energy. It is the energy of life. And when we discuss this stuff, it's talking about life. It's very much present. It's very much present. It's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this stuff. And I mean, we've spoken about this a bit in the past, but, the idea, I guess I've been living a little differently in terms of energy exchanges, home exchanges, and a lot of those kind of things. But yeah, I've also delved a little bit into the idea of identity and, how we can actually break away from that and be global citizens and not have to be tied to any of these claims. So maybe a topic for another day and another long discussion on that. But I love that. And I think, you were one of the first people who opened my mind to the idea of how inflation devalues us. So thank you. And thank you for sharing this with everyone today. It's really important. And so thank you for that professional advice from you. What has been the best professional advice that you've received, though, along your journey, especially as an entrepreneur and having walked such an interesting road?
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I've only ever read the books, and I do have some mentors, but it's never been on. Yeah, it's funny. Like things are very much on a specific case by case basis, but I don't know I don't know about advice in a package and a one-liner, but I think what has been critical for me, what took me to understand to do stuff and actually be somewhat effective, at least able to play the game, whether I win is different question, but at least to play the game, is you have to operate from a position of sincerity, but you also have to know when to taper what you present. And I'm not going to go run into Absa Bank or JP Morgan Bank raving about globalization, and say, no, we must stop this thing. That's a fireside chat. Like, I'm happy to chat about it here, and it's very sincere. And I might still feel it all the time, but depending on the situation, you have to speak to the audience and just taper and just filter the lens that people might be witnessing you through. I think that's very important to us, especially this day and age with expression and social media. We're so used to just saying what we think, and it's this whole shock factor and sensationalism, and it almost encourages us to live on that front. But we need to find the skill of, how do I retain my truth, my sincerity, and live in that space, live rooted in my space, and at the same time be able to withstand the winds of the world and not have the tree blow over, but present myself in the appropriate way for the situation, which doesn't negate myself. It just presents it in the correct way. I think that's been my hardest challenge over time, because I do like to speak my mind. And it's hard. It's hard if you're a sincere person. You just want to be honest the whole time. But there are some formats and some spaces where that is not good. It's unhealthy for you, in fact. And so to protect yourself, you need to learn how to censor or filter rather, what you're putting out. Not censor, just filter. So yeah, that's been the most valuable lesson for me, I think.
Well, I think you operate in a very interesting space where it's still very much growing. There's a lot of new ideas, and it's also very polarized, right? So it's probably very specific to kind of what you choose to follow in your life. And I think it's good advice. I would say, because you kind of chose to speak on this topic, and you know quite a bit about it, it might be interesting if you could share, if you have anything to share with our listeners on where's like the best place to get advice on this, or really read up and understand how the inner workings of this are, to learn more about this. Are you just searching on the internet? Are there certain sites? And you could feel free to not say either, but just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are a lot of places, and there are a lot of sites and centralized exchanges which will offer some sort of a attempt to offer you a bit of an introductory journey down to understanding this stuff. But I think, you could come across it. There is a few books, and I was just trying to find the name of this particular book, which is excellent. I forget it for the second. I'll find it in a minute. A particular book which everyone should read. And that gives you a real grounding. You need the fundamental. That will give you the principles and the fundamentals. Once you have that under your belt, then you're able to correctly filter and correctly discern what's going on in the news, what's going on in the world. And you probably don't need to go to any site. You can do it yourself. And I would say that's the goal. That's the dream. We want everyone to be financially literate on their own. And it's not complicated. It really isn't. You can forget the technology stuff, like the actual software stuff. That is complex, clearly. But the philosophies and the ideas, these are very simple to grasp. Anyone can grasp them. And the deeper we grasp it as individuals, then the less we need to sort of to rely on these outside sources, and it kind of just folds in on itself. The idea is that money is simple, and once you have the understanding of what this thing is, that's all you need. You don't need to keep learning. You just develop your relationship with it. So I would say that's the approach. It's a bit of a different approach to learning other systems, where you're reliant on other people. Bitcoin, you rely on yourself.
Yeah. But I love that, because I think, and I'm going to go back to what I kind of said when we started this theme, is that money is not the root of all evil, because money is you. It's your value, it's your energy, and it's exactly what you're saying, Leon. It's you can have a relationship with money because it's an extension of you in the world. And so I think it's beautiful encouragement that people develop that relationship, that loving relationship, because we all tend to have a bit of a hate relationship with it and a fearful relationship.
Only when you
So
don't have the money.
that's it. But thank you. And I think that's a really nice gem of the week to kind of kickstart this little section that we do every week of how we fill our cups and how we be amazing working professionals in the world. Saj, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I actually followed, Ricky was on a few weeks ago, and she mentioned watching the movie Air, which talks about the story of Nike and how they signed Michael Jordan. And it was just very interesting. I really thought they did a great job with the movie. She highlighted, the importance of partnerships. And it was very interesting to kind of see, because talking about a time where Nike wasn't the top player, right? They were actually the underdog. And it has very interesting insights. Their department is understaffed, under budgeted, trying to do the most. And it's always hard, I think, when you're in those points, because when you're going through it, you never think like, oh, this is the part that they're going to show in the movie, right? You're thinking like, shit, everything sucks. And like, I'm getting hammered by my boss. I'm getting hammered by the rest of my group, in terms of I'm trying to push something along. And I think a lot of people feel that way when you're in the thick of it. You don't realize that it's going to get better. And obviously with work, and it's not like it just magically happened. But what it took while you're going through those motions, I'm always very fascinated about that part of the journey, is like when you're going through the thick of it, what you choose to do, how many people said no, and what about if you stopped at one point because you listened? And so I think for me, that's like a big thing is, there's like certain quotes where it's just like, don't take advice from people who haven't done what you're trying to do. And a lot of times nobody is trying to do what you're doing, because even if the three of us went after the same thing, we have different expertise, we have different networks, we have different philosophies. So I just thought it was very, very interesting. And a lot of times people will say like, why don't you listen? And I'm like, why would I listen? Like the person I have to answer to at the end of the day is me. So, I thought it was just very interesting to kind of see the tenacity that it took. And it's nice to see. I was thinking like, wow, there's so many ways this could have went wrong. And it took quite a few people before it went right, and anyone who probably wasn't on the team. So I think it's hard sometimes when you're building things and as an entrepreneur, because you don't know if you're on the right path. And I'm sure there's many instances, maybe at the same company with the same people. There's like one instance where he's talking to the CEO and he's trying to convince him to get a higher budget. And the CEO of Nike, and he's like, well, when have I been wrong? And he names multiple instances where he's been wrong. And I'm just thinking like, shit, those could have been the movies too. Those could have been the other movies where you thought that like it was gonna happen, but it didn't happen. And I think it's very much about that, where it's like, you don't know which is actually gonna be the time that you're going to create your movie. So I thought it was really interesting. I'd actually really recommend people watch it for the way that the movie was done, also for the messages that were in it. And I felt very captivated. Sometimes you watch things and I'm like scrolling on my phone or doing other things, but I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this. And it made me kind of put down my phone and see the nuances that were shown. So yeah, that was something that kind of filled my cup. And I tried to reflect on my own journey after about, what that means and what it's telling me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's in the list.
How about you, Leon? What filled your cup this week? What did you feel you could celebrate as a working professional that kept you going? What energized you?
Yes. Perfect. I got a perfect example. It's like tax return, end of financial year accounting for Cape Crypto. And Nicole's heard a bit of this before and has a few battle scars herself. And yeah, accounting's never been, funnily enough, as much as I love economics and I love that whole stuff, accounting on its own there's always been a mental block for me. Always, since school. I did terribly in accounting. I think I failed it. I don't know. And I never really got it. It was always like, I don't know, it had its own language. I didn't understand, being so rational and, software oriented, I'm very much, I need to know the principle and how did it come and why is it this way? And that go down to first principles. And accounting just didn't seem to have that. It was like, just learn it. This is the way we do it, the end. And I just don't think that way. I really I can't learn that way. So I was forced to, and this is great, I was forced to actually understand how accounting works on this weekend because I have to submit all this stuff for licensing applications. And I had to, in essence, clean up that energy. I had a very big blockage there of my money energy because accounting is so directly related to all of this stuff, but business accounting specifically. I had to clean up that energy. And so I just took the time on Sunday and I just, like you, Saj, I normally put something on to kind of half distract my thoughts. I'm like watching something on Netflix and then I'm reading accounting stuff and I'm kind of trying to figure it out. And I just thought, what am I doing? Let me focus on this thing. And I asked the question I'd really been wanting to ask for years. And I said, what the hell is debit and credit? How does debit and credit work? It makes no sense. It's inverted in accounting.
It is inverted in accounting.
It's inverted. What the hell? And I just couldn't get past this. So I finally just went on this rampage of trying to figure this out. And I came across this one guy who had a video. And he explained it so brilliantly. And I'm not going to try to distill it because I don't yet own that knowledge. But it tapped something for me. And what it tapped specifically is that these terms are Italian. It's actually debitare and creditare. They're Italian terms. And they were invented in, I think, 1500, or was it 500 or 1500, year 1500, one of the two. And they have total different meanings in Italian. And they got nothing to do with credit and debit as we understand it today. Nothing. And this was the principle I was looking for. And so when I realized that, I was like, I get it. And how they came to be, and this was the realization, is that accounting back then, as they were written, these accounting principles, was written for the perspective of the owner of the business. The owner was given a book of accounts, and the owner would then read it from his or their point of view and say, okay, so I owe how much money to the bank? How much assets do I have as the owner? And this whole thing then kind of filtered down and made sense. So I understood the principle. And that was a huge breakthrough. It's been bothering me for over 20 years, 30 years actually. And and I just sat there, when you realize something, you're like, fuck, so that's how it works. Okay, I got it, yes. And then I've now been gradually letting the pieces fall into place. And I feel a lot more confident with accounting. And when these things happen, energy moves and energy shifts, and you're like, "Whew, yeah, I got a bit more energy. I feel better. I'm enthusiastic again about these things. It's no longer a weight on my shoulder. It's now something I'm excited about." Yeah, so that's what happened this week. It was huge. It's cool.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm sorry that whatever I've explained in the past did not land in the same way, but I think it's wonderful that you went back to the philosophy to understand the economics.
Nicole is the most patient person I've ever known. She will never lose her cool. I've never known her. And I'm sitting here, we're like 35,000 hours into this, asking her the same question. But why, Nicole? And so, thank you for your patience.
Well, bless the Italians for the accounting.
Yes.
Oh man.
What's filling your cup this week, Nicole?
It's been such an interesting. Filling your cup's been a weird word for me this week, actually, because I've really had a lot of moments of emptying this week. Every week we kind of try fill our cups like we talk about, and sometimes you think that's about making sure that you're doing so much and you're so energized and you're jam-packing so much in and you're so hard on yourself if you're not getting progress in terms of the things that you thought you should be prioritizing. And this week I've just really had to tone it down, and my body's just gone like, hey, just no thinking, no choosing, just be. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful space. And even when I try, I think it's because I've also, like you mentioned, Leon, I've switched something. And when you switch into that different vibration and energy, you can't go back. And as much as I try and go back into that world of, trying to think too much or choose too much, I am now in this new energy of just being empty. And I've discovered that emptiness is not a bad word. It's really a space for dreaming, and it's a space to make the connections that I was probably missing before because I was trying to fill my cup too much. So it's been a really interesting week of kind of filling my cup with nothing, and it's been wonderful. So yeah,
That's awesome. In one of the acting books, the Meisner technique, if I recall correctly, the very first chapter, I think, is called "Empty Your Cup." And that's exactly it, because you can't, if you pour stuff into a full cup, it overflows. You can't capture it. And so like the very first thing in that technique, at least, is emptying the cup. Yeah, it's so important.
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it is. And to create change, you have to let go of the history. We talk about that a lot here. You're not your history. Yeah. So it was really a good week. Yeah. For our audience out there, all our listeners, we've taken you on a really interesting journey this month, this theme of money positivity. How are you creating financial freedom for yourself? Do you believe in centralized authority? How are you managing money? How are you moving money in the world? What does this decentralized way of living feel like for you? And is it up your alley?
And we'd love to hear from you. Remember to tag us on hashtag These Friday Feels to share your stories and listen to us on all your favorite platforms. And to work with us or help us broadcast Friday Feels from your space and organize your next workation, reach out to us at hello@friday-feels.co. And thank you so much, Leon, for coming on. We really would love to explore, I would say, a lot of the topics that you mentioned. I'm definitely going to be Google them. And maybe you can share really quickly with our audience where they can find you.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. It was so fun to wax lyrical a bit. And I quickly found the book that I was talking about, by the way. The book is called The Bitcoin Standard. You can find that anywhere. That is the book. Read that one and you will be good to go. You can find me at my company website, which is capecrypto.com. That is short for the Cape Crypto Exchange. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on much social media. It's not really my speed at the moment. But yeah, if you want to chat, reach out to me on LinkedIn, I suppose. I'll spin your yarn.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. That was so fun. Thank you.
Next week, we are starting a new theme. So we wrapped up money positivity, although I feel like we still have a lot to explore in it. So we'll have to get back into it another day. But next month, it's April. And we're going to end the first week of this quarter of this year by thinking about where time has gone. I guess time has really like drunk some Red Bull, grown wings, and flown away. So some of us may be feeling a little bit burnt out. We're feeling the turn of the season. Life does bring us these moments. So we're going to take a look at how to endure through exhaustion. Is it even something that we should be doing or thinking about? So let's find out. But until next time, that is our mix. And we've had so much fun mingling with you. And we wish you safe travels into your bed, into the night, and into this awesome weekend. See you next week, and keep it real.